I'm perfectly capable of realizing that more than one thing can be true at the same time. Should you or I be buying a Samsung Galaxy S25 Edge? Absolutely not. But at the same time, should I sit here and jump up and down and say that no one asked for it or that it shouldn't exist or to complain about the fact that Samsung would create such a device? Absolutely not as well. I can't, on the one hand, criticize Samsung for not doing enough to innovate on its smartphones and then complain when the company actually does. You know, there are plenty of devices that are out there that are proof of concept. They're important because of what they show the company can do. We saw it on the first generation Z Fold device. Was that consumer ready? No, it wasn't. You should not have paid $2,000 or whatever the entry price was for the original Galaxy Z Fold. It just wasn't ready to be a product that should have been in your pocket. But it did lead to other innovations. Samsung was able to refine the design, and it led to the clamshells, which I think are the better of the two folding form factors. So you can't say that that Samsung shouldn't try anything new, shouldn't release a device that might not necessarily be for you, because the company could learn things from what it does on a new form factor, and you could vote with your pocket. You don't have to buy it. You can let it sit there, and it does occupy an odd place in the Samsung lineup, and I think that's for a reason. But innovation isn't always a show of hands. And I can tell you that if you just look at the Apollo moon missions, how many inventions, how many technologies, how many processes did we come up with because we went to the moon? A lot of them, right? So it's not, and Samsung's not doing anything that, we're not curing cancer here. But at the same time, Samsung might be able to take the things that it learns manufacturing something that thin and let it trickle down to other devices. And that's where we come to the second idea here, and that I believe the rumors that the Galaxy S25 Edge next year will replace the S25 Plus in the lineup. The Edge form factor, the thinner form factor, will be the middle child for Samsung's Galaxy flagship lineup. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you look at it from a business perspective, there are just so many reasons why Samsung's not dumb. You can sit there all you want. We complain about Samsung and I complain about innovation, but even the lack of innovation that I saw in the S25 Ultra, even the high prices, Samsung does that intentionally. Samsung does these things on purpose. They know what they could get away with. Samsung sits there and understands who their buyer is. So while it might not be someone who wants to be on the bleeding edge, it is a buyer that they have pretty well a nice profile of. And so when you look at what the Edge could provide in the middle, you then start to see enough of a differentiation between the S25 Plus or the new and improved S25 Plus, that would be an Edge, and the Ultra series. So the middle, the Plus series, would become the thin, sleek one like we used to get with the S series. It was the pretty one, the one that you find, the stylish one, the kind of the fancy one, that's the one that you'd buy. But then if you want to spend that extra $300, then you can have the workhorse that we're used to. Then you can have the S25 Ultra or the Ultra series, the S26 Ultra with the S Pen, with all the rest of it, with a larger camera set, with whatever Samsung decides to put in that. But there will at least be clear lines drawn between the two devices. So we won't have the situation this year where I think, unless you really need an S Pen, unless you absolutely need an S Pen and the better camera lens, there's no reason why you wouldn't spend less money on an S25 Plus. It has a lot of the same things that you'd want to pay for in a flagship, but for $300 less. And that's why it makes sense that the S25 Edge, or whatever next year's Edge is going to edge out. You can't get that anywhere else. The middle child of the Galaxy lineup. Because if you look at the spec sheet, 6.7-inch display, you got the 12 gigs of RAM, you got the two cameras, okay? So they make it a little thinner. You got the extra camera here. This is a much better buy, by the way. I will put a link to this in the description. If you're thinking about a Samsung phone and you even contemplated the Edge, do yourself a favor. Go ahead and pick up an S25 Plus instead. Because unless you need a smartphone right now, you can wait until next year and get a thinner device, or you can pick up this one and get a better device for less. You're going to get the same amount of RAM. You're going to get a 1,000 milliamp hour larger battery. And it makes a difference. The people who are early adopters on the S25 Edge, you better be an enthusiast, number one, But the odd kind of flip side of that is, you tell me an enthusiast that's not going to be a hardcore user of the phone? So that's going to live with a 3,900 milliamp hour old school lithium ion battery? Samsung could have easily made, and this is the tell too, Samsung could have easily made the S25 Edge a consumer-ready daily driver device this year. If that 3,900 milliamp hour battery were a silicon carbon battery, you could have fit a higher density cell in the same footprint. Then you'd be getting pretty comparable battery life. You'd have the power, you'd have the RAM. Yeah, you have to compromise on the camera there. You'd be missing a lens, but it at least enters the conversation as something that you'd want to buy for $1,000 or $1,100 or whatever you get it for. It was a carrier deal. There's a whole bunch of things that you could do there that would at least make sense to me if that's the direction Samsung wanted to go in. But I don't think they want to sell a lot of these this year. I think this was a proof of concept deal. I think they are going to try to, because think about what has to happen to sandwich that much stuff and a Snapdragon 8 Elite and any battery at all and all this stuff into 5.3 millimeters. Samsung has to learn how to position stuff, has to learn how to manufacture stuff, has to learn how to configure these pieces and parts in order to get them into that thin frame. You can't tell me that's not going to help down the line. You can't tell me there aren't going to be other devices that take advantage of that. That's the point. That's the point. And so if you need a device this year, if you're a regular consumer, get yourself an S25 Plus. If you're somebody that likes that Edge form factor, to me, I wait until next year. Hello Kitty does as well. I wait until next year because I think that's when you're going to be able to really score one that makes a lot of sense. You're going to have that silicon carbon battery. I almost guarantee you're going to have the silicon carbon battery in that device. You're going to have, maybe they squeeze another lens in there. I don't know. But you're going to get the battery life you'd expect from a flagship. It's going to be the middle one. It's going to be in that $1,000 price range. And then you're going to have a device that's lighter, thinner, and is different enough from the S26 Edge, X26 Ultra, I should say, that makes you at least understand where you are. It's so difficult to come up with a buyer for the S25 Ultra right now as it sits. It's very difficult to sit here and say, well, you know what? You get the Snapdragon 8 Elite, you get the same amount of RAM, slightly bigger battery, like 100 milliamp hours. Is that going to be worth a $300-$400 gap between an S25 Plus and S25 Ultra? It's too much of a conversation, and Samsung knows that. And this has been a problem that's been brewing for a while. Ever since they brought the Quad HD Plus to the Plus model of Galaxy, it's been brewing. There's been a conflict going on that unless you need that S Pen and you're willing to spend big bucks for it on top of an S25 Plus, why would you go ahead and spring for the extra? This solves a lot of those problems. So you could sit there and jump up and down and say, this isn't a device you should buy, and I absolutely agree with that. Unless you're on the absolute bleeding edge and you just need a fancy, sleek device and you're somehow not a power user who's also an enthusiast, but on the bleeding... Look, I don't know who the profile is for the S25 Edge. But I do know the roadmap of what Samsung expects to do with the S25 Edge. And that's why it has the same screen size. That's why they try to fit as many of the same specs in the S25 Edge as the S25 Plus, because you're looking at the replacement for this device right here. So if you need a phone right now, and you're looking at a Samsung, and your budget's around $1,000, this is the no-brainer, S25 Plus. But if you like a thinner device, if you're saying, like, listen, I just want something that feels like I'm holding the future in my hand, which is what everybody said who's held one. It's just very thin. That's thin. 5.3 millimeters is thin. And then you get all the rest of it with that. Or 5.8 millimeters, I should say. It's really thin. It's a thin device. It's a thin device. So you're getting a lot of things there that make a lot of sense. So if you're somebody who really thinks that they want something different, wait until next year. Because I think you're going to get a lot of improvements and you're going to see a much better battery life from the device, maybe even an extra camera, and you're going to get it at that $1,000 price range. And for everybody else, we can't have it both ways. I can't sit here and jump up and down and complain about Samsung not innovating enough anymore with the S25 Ultra and all these other devices that come out, and then sit here and cry when the company finally does. It might not be for you, but not every first generation device should be for you. You know, as favorable as I am on the original iPhone, we didn't have the App Store. We sat there looking at that same home screen for a year before that device came into its own. So while it was revolutionary, it was 10 steps above everything that I was using at the time. It still took a while to come into its own. Same thing here. Samsung's released a product. They want to see how it works out in the wild, but this is going to be for the future. I'm sure it's going to trickle down to other devices, making the Ultras thinner, whatever it happens to be, but I don't think it's a bad thing because you learn a lot of things unintended along the way. And I think that overall it's going to help Samsung in the future and help us get better devices. I'm just happy. I'm not going to sit there and go, Samsung is innovating again. May not be the innovation that we wanted, but beggars can't be choosers. If you've made it this far, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Until next time, have that Steve-licious day.